Good morning. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, on March 29th, Governor of 2023, Governor Maura Healey signed into law an act making appropriations for the fiscal year 23 and to provide for supplementing certain existing appropriations and for certain other activities and projects. This act includes an extension until March 31st of 2025 of the remote meeting provisions. This meeting of the Long Range Financial Planning Committee will be conducted by remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so by using the webinar link that was provided in the notice. There are no in-person attendance of members, and every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. So we are recording this for posting later at Westwood Media Center. And with that, I will just do a quick roll call of attendees. We'll begin with Julie Bride.
Here.
Nancy Hyde.
Here.
Nancy James.
Here.
Maya Plotkin.
Here.
Paul Tesseri.
Here.
Skip Wells.
Here.
We're juggling folks here. Chris Paff.
Here.
Let's see here. I saw Dan Weller is in the attendees, but has he joined?
No.
Not yet. Okay. Let's see here. I think the rest are ex officio members, correct?
Melissa. You got Melissa.
Melissa McDonough here.
Sorry, Melissa. Thank you, Melissa. I'm scrolling
Thanks,
through
Nancy.
and as Tish is admitting people, the thing keeps getting.
It's all good.
I think you got Phil. You got to check in too.
I think I got Phil to be good. Maybe not. Phil Shapiro.
Here.
And Dan Weller. I see you are now in. Give us a hear if you can hear us. Dan. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So let's begin with an update from the chair. And basically, I wanted to bring you up to speed on a variety of things that have been going on with respect to Fire Station 1. The feasibility study is complete. We looked at a number of different location options, and the one that seemed the most feasible, best solution was to rebuild on the existing site. You can look at not last night's, but the prior October meeting for more information on that particular site and what the building is envisioned to look like at sort of a preliminary. The next step is to go to design and bid. The estimated cost that will be refined in the bid document and design process is in the range of $38 to $40 million. Last night, the select board voted to hold a special town meeting on Wednesday, January 17th. Is Chris Coleman on as well?
Yes.
Okay, good. And we had looked at a variety of options. Let me talk about the rationale for the special town meeting. There was a desire to get the design documents done in a more expeditious fashion to be able to align with getting the funding approved to marry up with election cycles. So Chris, you want to elaborate a little bit on that just so that we can have everybody understand the rationale for the special town meeting.
So we looked at 3 different dates. There was an internal group that worked, that the select board asked us to review different options. We looked at 3 different dates. We looked at December 5th, we looked at January 8th, and we looked at January 16th. The challenge with December 5th was we just didn't think we had enough time to get everything done. And then we were being mindful of the holidays in the month of December, Hanukkah beginning on December 7th, running through December 15th, then looking at December 18th as a possible day, and really didn't want to make a recommendation to the board to have a special town meeting 1 week before Christmas. So we looked at after the holidays, and we looked at January 8th, we looked at January 17th, and made a recommendation to the board after having a conversation with Tim regarding venue, with the town clerk, with the town moderator, and with the chair and the vice chair of the select board. Chair and vice chair of the FinCom, excuse me. Also trying to be mindful that mid-January is really when we start to begin the heavy lifting for the the next fiscal year budget process. So this is very early in that stage. So the recommendation was made for January 17th for the special town meeting. I think it's certainly something that we can work on. We have 3 different articles that we recommended to the board. One was for design bid funding for the fire station, and also the abandonment of a bond and a reallocation of a prior voted bond article. And then we have a miscellaneous article. The miscellaneous article may be something that the board would vote to remove at any point in time, but also, as in the past, as many of you are aware, the town has had miscellaneous articles for the annual town meeting. At this point, we're not anticipating any other article, but I also wanted to make sure that we had that miscellaneous article in the event bond council wanted us to split out the action within that bond. We have been working with bond council, and having one article seems to be supported by bond council, but we just wanted to make sure we had that. We didn't want to have any blips as we got closer to the end of the process.
Right. Good. Any questions with respect to special town meeting and Fire Station 1?
Yeah, the design money, is that coming from within town resources, or are you talking about an override or debt exemption?
We have some things that we're exploring. Chris has not made the final recommendation to the select board yet on that, but there are some ideas for how to fund that without needing to go for an override.
Okay, and Rob, you made a reference to lining things up with an election date. Do you want to add to that, or is that, did I mishear?
So Chris, why don't we go through some of the timing that we were talking about with respect to why special now as opposed to waiting for annual planning process at the annual town meeting?
So as far as the election, so as you may be aware, we will have 4 elections in calendar year 24. We were mindful that having the recommendation to have the special town meeting on January 17th, if we had an article that required borrowing, which we do not right now, we would have to have a special town election. If we were trying to time that up with our annual election, we would have to move the special town meeting most likely to an early date in February. So we were mindful of that as well. We're mindful of the articles. So to also address your other question, Nancy, the recommendation to the board would not be to borrow for the design bid funds.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we had to do that, then we would have to have a special election or move the special town meeting to a date that would tie with the annual town election within 90 days of the annual town election.
Yeah, I guess I don't know that this is the venue, but I guess I don't understand why we need a special and why we wouldn't wait until May to do all this. I still am not clear on that, but we can take that offline if you want to.
No, I'm happy to address that. After speaking with the Dorm Whittier, who conducted the feasibility study, they need about 8 to 9 months. And so the timing, if we're going forward, what we're looking at is with authorization, if authorization were to be granted in January, we would be looking at a October timeframe where we would have the design bid work completed as early as October. It could be a little bit later. And then if the board was going to have a fall town meeting or some type of special, we could begin the construction. We could then ask for the construction funds and then work through the winter on certain matters of the phasing. One aspect is redoing the American Legion building to be a temporary station, and then really kick off the construction season in the spring for the fire station, which would be the demolition of the existing station and the rebuild on site.
So you'd be talking about spring of 25.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and you know, as Chris just alluded to, the as we've talked about sort of the reimagining of existing town facilities, getting some of the renovation done in order to have the Legion building serve as the temporary firehouse would then serve us well for future potential uses of the Legion building. So there's some benefit to that. Any other questions with respect to Fire Station 1? Because I know that's one of the projects on our list. And as I talk about, you know, the overarching facilities, we talked last time, and I'd gotten a pulse check with all of you about the idea of doing a facility study. You know, when we first got together as a group, we talked about, okay, let's take a look at where we are from, you know, current debt level relative to our financial policies, and then be able to look at what the schedule looks like as things roll off. So we have a good sense of where we stand and our ability to slot some of the various projects. As we talk about doing a facility study, the benefit to something like that is, in addition to having a truer sense of potential costs and need, it would also allow us to do some of this potential consolidation and or repurposing of existing buildings. So Chris, do you want to talk at all about what we would like to do with respect to getting a recommendation to be able to take to the select board?
Sure, thank you. So I've had conversations with Tim. The school department has submitted a request for a capital improvement plan or facility study, excuse me, I apologize. The town is doing the same, and really think that, you know, with long range and the last discussion that we had, my recommendation to the committee would be to submit a recommendation to the select board to consider a facility study for both town and school. And that would be something that we could, if the committee was inclined, we could have that recommendation made to the select board at their next meeting on November 13th.
Yes, and so in sort of the informal polling that we did, and it seemed like we had relative consensus, I'd like to entertain a motion from the group to recommend a facility study to the select board so that we have this group's input to be able to share with my colleagues.
Can I ask a question first, Rob?
Sure.
Yeah, Chris, do you have the benefit of seeing past facility studies? I know it's been a while since one has been done for the town and things have evolved, but one, do you have access to that? And two, might the parties who have done those in the past, or the party, I can't remember if it was the same consultant, be available, and would you consider them again just to maybe leverage off of past work?
So Nancy, we do have one. I have seen the one from 2013. And we could certainly, I'll sit down with Tim. I don't know if Tim has had an opportunity to see that yet, but I'd like to sit down with him and have that conversation. But I also want to make sure that we, one of the things I'd like to do, just to discuss with Tim, is go from an economy of scale. And if we were able to have one professional conduct a study for both town facilities and school facilities. And I certainly understand and appreciate the time sensitivity with the school and what the school is looking to do. So if the schools had to be phase 1 and the town had to be phase 2, we were certainly very willing and supportive to do something like that.
Yeah. And the other piece I have is, will this help answer the question on what happens to the Deerfield School for the school department?
So
Because I think that's part of what's in play here, right?
Yep. And so as a good facilitator, I see that we have hands up from both Tim and Maya. So Tim, why don't you go first, and then Maya, you can come in after, or however the two of you would like to order your comments.
Yeah, I'll defer to Maya first. Her hand was up certainly before mine. So
Okay.
Thanks, Tim. So just to clarify, the recommendation to the select board, is it going to be for two sort of separate studies, one looking at the schools and one looking at the town, just from the same provider and, you know, potentially providing economies of scale that way? Or is it a combined study looking at the buildings sort of?
I think what I just heard Chris say is the idea is to get them done by the same provider. They could be on different tracks from a timing perspective. But you know, I think there's some economies to be gained by having the same provider doing that. Is that right, Chris?
That is right. I would certainly have a more depth conversation with Tim to see if that's something that works for the schools. And if not, then I'm certainly open to conversations with him to see what would be best for everybody.
Okay. And then just a reminder, the school, I know you guys have the town has a 2013 capital study. We have a 2015 one. I don't know if they were done by the same group. I know that, I guess it would go out to RFP. Is that what we're doing? Or would we just?
Yeah, we would follow the procurement laws.
Yeah.
And to, you know, put that out. I think one of the things that would be most beneficial is if both the town and the school were to provide the most recent study, so the consultant can look at that, or look at both of those, and then work from there.
Okay. Thanks, Tim.
Sure. Thanks, May, and thanks, Chris. Yeah, I just want to sort of add to that, right? It's one of the things that I've certainly identified in my first few months on the job here is the significant challenges. And we've talked about some of the immediate needs that we have at Sheehan, at Thurston, even like with the roof repairs at the high school. I think one of the things that I just want to layer around the separate nature of the school part of this is that it wouldn't be just around the facilities, but there's an educational visioning component that would need to happen with us. As I say a lot, schools are only as good. The physical infrastructure of schools is only as good as how they either support or inhibit the kind of learning that can take place inside of them. And so it's important that is a layer of the work that we do. And then, Nancy, to your question, I can speak from my previous experience in a former district. You know, we had done a facility study back in 2012, just as I was coming on board as superintendent. That positioned us incredibly well to set up not only a project that we do with the MSBA, but also the kinds of long-term projects that brought stability to some of our other buildings, right? So I've seen firsthand the benefit of this at least on the educational side as well.
Great. Well, Tim, thank you for that commentary. I know that's consistent with what you said the other day in front of FinCom as well. And you know, you're a welcome addition to the team. Certainly you bring some fantastic background and history in doing some of these types of things. I guess one of the questions that I would have based on your commentary on that educational visioning component of it, and it'd be interesting to Maya's question, were the two studies done by the same firm? Does the need for that educational visioning limit the list of potential providers?
From my experience, it doesn't necessarily. The architectural firms that would do this kind of work, they'll use a sub-consultant for the educational visioning component.
Okay.
So and we can kind of steer the direction of that based upon how the RFP or RFQ is written.
Okay. Questions from any of the rest of the members of the committee? All right, if that's
Mr. Chair, if I just to say, if this is something that is supportive of this committee to provide that recommendation to the select board, it would certainly be work that Tim and I would certainly work on to make that recommendation to the select board at their next meeting and look to begin something as soon as possible, or at least have authorization and funding available to begin this work as soon as possible.
okay.
Sorry, if I could just add one thing to that, Rob, as well, if you don't mind, please. I'm sorry, Phil. But I think from the school side, again, based upon timing, the ability to start as soon as possible on our end puts us in position so that we're well positioned to use the results of that study to inform our capital planning in fall of 24. And I think that that's really important as we build the FY26 budget at that point.
Very good. Phil, I just saw you were in.
Yeah, I think, and maybe this is stating the obvious, but I think having them related, I mean, there are potential for either, space coming in one direction or the other, or being used jointly or opportunistically, that if you had two separate timeframes and two separate vendors, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of. But, you know, I mean, I don't know. I'm out of the loop, so I don't know if there's a plan for the Deerfield, but, you know, whether that's an educational exclusively or a town exclusively or a joint use.
I think some of that, you know, obviously it's still under the care, custody, and control of the school committee. And I think that, you know, doing the type of study that we're talking about, both on the municipal and on the school side, then gives Tim and the school committee the type of information that they need to be able to make decisions with respect to those buildings. And then it would open up the possibility, if based on whatever their vision ends up being, for that to be another resource for us to use for other departments. You know, it's just I think it's a really helpful step for both the school side as well as the municipal side, you know, to be able to then lay out that vision based on what the results of that study are.
Right. So it's, to some extent, it's one study with two pieces, or it's two studies with one author or whatever, but they've got to be tied together so you can do just that, you know, just an observation.
And I think that's part of what we're looking for as the Long Range Financial Planning Committee, is to be able to say, okay, we have now a much more in-depth understanding of both what the opportunities are, and then how we might realize economies in what we end up doing as we put together a vision. Julie, I see you have your hand up.
Just a quick question, because I think I was thinking one thing with the study. Now I'm wondering, is part of this analysis also to bring in kind of external benchmarking or ideas around how other towns or places use space, kind of to Tim's point, better, you know, more efficient or whatever? Or are we just going to lay out, here are the facilities, here's the space in, you know, facilities we have, here are the needs we have, and help us figure it out? Like, are we reshuffling the same deck, or are we looking to be creative in some ways and figure out the best use? And Deerfield in particular feels like a great resource for the town, the location. You know, do we put forth a vision for what Deerfield could be, or are we saying, you know, move the preschool there? Do you know what I mean?
I do. And I think the answer to that is there's a sort of a sequence, right?
Yeah.
And so the first step is this study, right? So that we get an assessment of all of the buildings, all of the things that would need to be addressed. And then based on that information, Tim May of the school committee will put together what their vision is for on the educational side, and that may or may not free up the space at Deerfield to then have a transfer of care, custody, and control back over the municipal side. And at that point, we can then start some of that visioning and creativity. But I think we have to honor the fact that it's still under the care, custody, and control of the school committee, and work through what this study reveals for us. Is that a fair assessment, Chris and Tim?
Yeah, I think that's certainly, it sounds like a fair assessment. I just want to emphasize that the study from the towns, or at least from my perspective, we're looking to see how we can use our existing facilities more efficiently. So that would certainly be a challenge that we would ask the professionals. And so we're looking to have the study done on the inventory that the select board currently has care, custody, and control of. So we'll be looking at that throughout the town facilities. If something were to change, we would then look at that as well. But right now, that's the objective.
Yeah, and I would echo a similar objective from the school department side again, right? It starts with an educational visioning piece. How do we support the needs of our students in the district? How do our facilities allow us to do that best? And if that's informed by the ideas that have existed in this district previously, as well as what our consultants can bring with creative thinking, as well as our creative thinking around that process. But it starts with what we have. So,
Rob, I want to just final statement from me. I just want to say how great it is to see the coordinated effort with the municipal and the schools, because historically we've been on different timelines and different looks at it. So this is really going to be very productive because we know there are overlaps. It's not a lot, but there are definitely overlaps. So coordinating this and trying to find a consultant or consultants that can do it in that manner is really good for the town.
Yeah, and I think that, that type of collaboration also speaks to, what the foundation of this committee is intended to be, right? It's, we have but one pie, and, as we plan things out mindfully, we can't do them, in isolation, right? It's we have to take a look at this over the long term based on what we're able to do from a revenue side to support those things. So, okay.
Yeah. Can I just add one, I guess, and I'm only thinking Deerfield because that's the only one we've kind of, I just hope, and I agree with you, Nancy, it's nice to see a collaborative process, but I hope in the handoff, if Tim says there's no, educational need for Deerfield in this example, that in the handoff of that to the municipality, we don't lose sight of what's best for the residents in the town overall. And it may be a kid-focused resource or something else. And we don't, flip to, okay, our administrative buildings are falling apart, so we're going to use Deerfield for that. I hope the vision stretches beyond just square footage and, heating and insulation type things. So
Sure. I mean, if you think about some of the things that are on the list, right? There is somewhere there's a desire for a recreation center, right? So,
right.
Could a portion of that building be used someday for something like that? Absolutely. But I think we need to work through, the
Agreed.
process first and get the assessment of all the facilities.
Yeah.
So
Rob,
with
if I could just
Sure.
add one more thing.
Mhm.
Again, just focusing on the properties, the facilities that's under the care, custody, control of the select board. One of the things that we will be looking at, Julie and committee, is with the support of the select board, and if we get support at town meeting through a special town meeting for the design funds, how we could best use American Legion building after the fire station, after the fire department moves out of the temporary quarters back into, if the project were to be approved. So that's something that we would be looking at. And Julie, that's certainly something that we would certainly be considering. But again,
Is that
just
the-
focusing on the facilities that are currently under
Right.
the care, custody, control of the select board.
Is the American Legion closing? I didn't realize that.
The town purchased the American Legion building a couple of years ago.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
Chris, just one clarification on the American Legion. I know that there was a $40 million amount thrown out for the fire station. I know this is early, so that might change, but does that include the renovation of the American Legion?
It
Yes,
does.
it does.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I apologize, but yes.
No, you answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? And if not, I would entertain a motion to support a comprehensive facility study as a recommendation to the select board. Anybody can even say so.
Rob, can I ask, did that take into account Tim's recommendation that if we can't have one person do both studies, if they don't have the substantive background to give the educational support that Tim was indicating they need, does that motion support having two
Yeah.
different companies?
Yes, I think, Melissa, what I heard from Tim is that they often will sub that out from the educational visioning standpoint. So I would suspect that we would be able to find a company that would be able to do both sides of the study. And then when it came to the educational visioning, they would have some subcontracting help on that. Is that a fair representation, Chris and Tim?
It is from my end, yes. That's a fair representation.
Yes.
But we aren't limiting. I mean, nobody knows yet exactly which consultants or who might work. So this isn't a constraint on that process.
No, this is, making
Just a broad
recommendation.
recommendation.
Correct.
Correct.
That we all believe that there would be significant value gained from doing this type of study.
It seems like a quiet group today, so I will move what the chair of this committee put forth in his prior comment about what the motion is.
I'll second.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote. And Tish, would you mind reading the names I'm still watching everything on the panelist side jump around a bit, and I want to make sure that we get everybody's vote recorded properly.
Sure, okay, so Phil Shapiro,
Yes,
Nancy Hyde,
Yes,
Julie Bride,
Yes,
Nancy James,
Yes.
Paul Sherry,
Yes.
Maya Plotkin,
Yes.
Melissa McDonough,
Yes,
Dan Weller,
Yes.
Chris Pat,
Yes.
and it seems we have lost Skip Wells. I know he had to jump off, so, oh, Rob Gotti,
Skip appears to still be on, but maybe he's not. I don't know.
he was attending another meeting, so.
Oh, that's right. Okay. And
Rob Gotti?
I'm a yes. I'm a yes as well. Excellent. Okay. I guess the next thing to talk about is probably our next meeting date and some of the follow-ups that we want to be able to have for that next meeting. Stephanie, as you recall, is working on sort of that longer term where we stand and projecting revenue at a pretty constant basis to be able to look at where we stand relative to our financial policy caps. I think that she will be ready to present to the select board at our next meeting, and then I would say she would present to this group at our next meeting following the next select board meeting. So with that, as we start to head into holiday time period, our next select board meeting is November 13th. Would it be possible for this group to meet on Tuesday morning, the 14th of November? If that works for you at this time, if you just indicate such by raising your hand, I think that's probably the easiest way to make sure that we've got availability. There we go. Dan, Paul, and Phil, is that a problem for you all?
I'll be on vacation.
Okay. All right.
I've got some uncertainty, but it should be okay.
All right. Then let's plan to meet our next on November 14th at 8 a.m. via Zoom. And that's, as I said at the outset, I thought today would be a relatively brief meeting. I think the questions have been fantastic in terms of the interactivity. I think we have a lot more to accomplish, but I think that we've given some good direction for recommendation to the select board. So thank you all for your participation this morning. And if there are no additional questions, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
One more time, Tish, would you do the roll call?
Okay. Phil Shapiro,
Yes,
Nancy Hyde,
Yes,
Julie Bride,
yes.
Paul Sherry,
Yes.
Maya Plotkin,
Yes.
Nancy James,
Yes.
Melissa McDonough,
yes.
Dan Weller,
Yes.
Chris Pat,
Yes.
and Rob Gotti.
Yes. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.